The jungle was alive with sound, the incessant buzz of insects, the distant cries of unseen animals, and the rustle of leaves as the wind passed through. It was 1968, deep in the heart of the Vietnam War, and Captain Ethan Reynolds of the United States Army crouched in the underbrush, his heart pounding. Around him, the men of Bravo Company waited, their faces streaked with sweat and grime. They were tired, their supplies dwindling, but they had a mission to complete. The war had dragged on for years, consuming lives and testing the spirit of those who fought it. Ethan was no stranger to the horrors of battle. At 28, he was a seasoned soldier, hardened by countless skirmishes and the constant threat of ambush. But this mission was different. Intelligence had reported a heavily armed Viet Cong base hidden deep in the jungle, and it was up to Bravo Company to eliminate the threat. Ethan glanced at his men. Sergeant Jack Tex Carter, a sharpshooter from Texas, checked his rifle with practiced precision. Private First Class Danny Morales, the youngest of the group, clutched his dog tags, his lips moving in a silent prayer. Corporal Sam Doc Evans, the company's medic, adjusted his pack, his expression grim but determined. They were a diverse group, drawn from different corners of America, but they had become a family, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of war. The signal came just before dawn. Ethan raised his hand, motioning for the men to advance. They moved silently, their boots sinking into the damp earth. The jungle seemed to close in around them, the dense foliage blocking out the light. Every step was fraught with danger. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. The first explosion shattered the stillness. A landmine, hidden beneath the undergrowth, tore through the line, sending men flying. The air was filled with screams and the deafening roar of gunfire as the Viet Cong sprung their ambush. Ethan's instincts took over. "Take cover," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The men scrambled for safety, returning fire as bullets whizzed past. The battle was fierce, a brutal clash of wills. Ethan fought like a man possessed, his rifle barking as he took down enemy combatants. But for every soldier they felled, more seemed to emerge from the jungle, their black pajamas blending seamlessly with the shadows. The odds were against them, but Bravo Company held their ground. Amid the carnage, Ethan spotted a young Viet Cong soldier, no older than Danny, aiming a rocket-propelled grenade at their position. Without hesitation, Ethan fired, the shot finding its mark. The boy crumpled, the weapon falling harmlessly to the ground. Ethan's chest tightened. He had seen too many young lives lost on both sides, victims of a war they barely understood. Hours passed like an eternity. When the gunfire finally subsided, the jungle was eerily quiet. Smoke hung in the air, and the ground was littered with bodies. Ethan surveyed the scene, his heart heavy. They had survived, but at what cost? Several of his men lay motionless, their lifeless eyes staring into the void. Among them was Tex, the sharpshooter who had once regaled them with tales of his ranch back home. Ethan knelt beside him, his throat tight. "I'm sorry, brother," he whispered. The survivors regrouped, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion. They had achieved their objective, but the victory felt hollow. Ethan knew they couldn't linger. The jungle was unforgiving, and the Viet Cong would not be far behind. As they began their retreat, disaster struck. A hidden sniper opened fire, pinning them down. Danny was hit, the bullet tearing through his leg. He cried out, his voice filled with pain and fear.
"Doc,
help him!" Ethan yelled, returning fire to cover the medic's advance. Doc reached Danny, working quickly to stem the bleeding. "We need to move, Captain," he said, his voice strained. Ethan nodded, formulating a plan. They would split into two groups, one to draw the sniper's fire, the other to carry Danny to safety. It was a gamble, but they had no choice. Ethan volunteered to lead the diversion, knowing the risk. "You get him home, Doc," he said, gripping the medic's shoulder. "That's an order." Doc hesitated, then nodded, his eyes filled with unspoken words. Ethan turned to his remaining men, his voice firm. "Let's go, boys. For Texas. For everyone we've lost." They moved out, their every step drawing the sniper's attention. Bullets rained down, but they pressed on, their determination unyielding. Ethan felt a searing pain as a round grazed his shoulder, but he didn't falter. He thought of the men depending on him, of the lives he had sworn to protect. Finally, they reached a ridge overlooking the jungle. From there, Ethan could see Doc and the others moving swiftly, Danny's stretcher bouncing as they navigated the uneven terrain. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. The snipers' fire intensified, and Ethan realized their position was untenable. "Go!" he shouted to his men. "Get out of here!" They hesitated, unwilling to leave their captain behind. "That's an order," Ethan barked, his voice leaving no room for argument. One by one, they slipped away, their figures disappearing into the foliage. Ethan stayed behind, his rifle trained on the sniper's position. He fired relentlessly, his every shot buying precious seconds for his men. The pain in his shoulder was a distant echo, drowned out by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was a man with nothing to lose, a lone warrior standing against the darkness. When the enemy fire finally ceased, Ethan slumped to the ground, his strength spent. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, the silence almost deafening. He closed his eyes, his mind drifting to memories of home. The laughter of his sister, the warmth of his mother's embrace, the golden fields of Kansas. He had done his duty. He had given everything. Days later, a rescue team found the remnants of Bravo Company. Danny was alive, his legs saved thanks to Doc's quick actions. The men spoke of Ethan with reverence, their voices tinged with sorrow. He had been their leader, their anchor, their friend. His sacrifice had given them a chance to live. Back home, Ethan's name was etched onto a memorial alongside countless others who had given their lives in Vietnam. His story became a symbol of valor and brotherhood, a reminder of the human cost of war. For those who knew him, he was more than a hero. He was a beacon of hope in the darkest of times.